Hello aviators! Today I'm going to tell you about how to set the center of your zoom axis to your favorite level. Let's start with some overview of zoom in DCS. If you want to skip it, feel free to jump to any of the later chapters of your interest. Zoom in DCS is an essential tool. There are discussions about how realistic it is, extreme zooms are perhaps kind of cheating, but DCS doesn't give us the same level of details you can see in real life either. And that's why we often zoom in. At the same time, in real life, our peripheral vision gives us much wider field of view, or FOV or FOV, than a typical FOV in DCS. And that's why we zoom out. How can we zoom in DCS? Let's go to the control options here. I actually prefer this foldable view. It's easy to access all the sections. Sorry for this search. Especially when you collapse it here. Axis commands are always at the top. The search input is always ready for search. You don't have to switch the drop down here. So I like this much more. You can zoom either with buttons or keys, or with an axis command called zoom view. Let's search for the zoom actions. Zoom view is the axis. There is also this camera zoom view, which is only for mouse's scroll wheel, but that's less like an axis and more like buttons, really. I will not talk about mouse zoom anymore. With buttons, there is zoom in out with immediate zooms in the cockpit. It's zoom in out here. Probably more practical is zoom in out slow, which continuously changes the level of zoom, the speed of which can be set to one of the three levels activated by keyboard rate, slow, normal and fast shortcuts. Mostly normal is just fine. And then there is a zoom normal shortcut, which resets the zoom to a predefined default level. This will be very important very soon. I use both zoom in out slow bindings and zoom view axis. So I use the bindings and the axis. The zoom axis is on a self-centering cradle, or pedals if you will. I also have the zoom normal binding, so it's a shortcut that resets the zoom to the default value. Zoom also works in external views. Here both of them work continuously, but the non-slow version is just a bit faster. In the free camera views, you can move forward and backwards with zoom, like this, and the fast zoom is really fast. By the way, did you know that you can go to the map, click on any of the aerodromes, and with F11 get there into free camera view? I think it's pretty cool. I learned this quite recently and it's a very useful feature when you want to move with free camera very quickly. But let's get back to the zoom and zoom axis in particular. For most planes, the zoom axis goes from FOV 20 degrees to FOV 140, which is a minimal zoom. There are exceptions like F14 with 30 degrees minimum, and this plane, TF51D, which has 120 degrees maximum. If you want to see it, you should use the frame rate counter service info shortcut. Press it twice. First you will see the you will see just the FPS graph here, and then this stats. It will probably be somewhere here, but I moved it over here, and here you can see that the FOV is 70. Let's go to the maximum zoom, which is minimum FOV 20 degrees, and maximum FOV is 120. Normally it's mostly 140. Now the center of the axis is the midpoint between 20 and, in this case, 120, which is 70. If you don't use an auto-centered axis for zoom, you actually don't have a problem I'm going to solve now. The thing is, I like my default FOV at a particular level, which is different for each plane. I want to see mirrors, for instance. Always close the canopy if you want to see the mirrors, of course. And and now the movement is quite complicated, but we can use the shortcut keyboard rate slow, and that way it's much easier to fine-tune it. I want to change the direction here as well, and the zoom, and when I have it as I like it, I can save it. We'll talk about it later. Now, when it's saved, let's switch the keyboard rate back to the normal level so the looking around is faster. When it's saved, I can return to it anytime with view center and zoom normal shortcuts. So there are two shortcuts, one is for the direction, the other one for zoom. But my zoom cradle, it still doesn't care, you know. I will finish with FOV 70, but I want 97.5, let's say that's what I want right now. We will fix it. Let's talk about the FOV after the start of the mission. Under options, miscellaneous, you have a option synchronize cockpit controls with HOTAS controls at mission start. If you don't use this, then the default view we have just set should be used. The direction seems to work that way, however the FOV is always higher than your default view FOV. There is a relation. Initial mission FOV changes with your default view FOV, but it doesn't follow it exactly. The relation is not even linear across the range, and I believe this is some kind of bug. But it's not really that serious. To fix the FOV, you simply use the zoom normal action and you set it to your preferred FOV. Let's just check the FOV here while we're loading the mission with FA18. The FOV changes to something that is somehow related to my default view, but it's not what I want. But the moment I will start fly, strangely enough, now when I touch the axis, it would actually change the FOV, but I didn't touch anything and the cockpit is not yet synced. When I press fly, it will sync the cockpit with my HOTAS. That includes also the zoom axis. Bang, 103, exactly what I want. I see all the mirrors and the instruments I like. The synchronization, however, is not perfect, doesn't work for all the planes. Here's a mission for TF51D, which changes the FOV. And even after fly, it doesn't change it, although my cradle should center it on 70, but it doesn't. So it's not perfect. In this case, of course, you have to use the zoom normal shortcut or do something with the axis. Let's talk about the default view setup in more detail, because the preferred FOV is part of the default view. The default view has a position and a view direction, so you can look anywhere you want, and you can also move the camera in the cockpit. This position then also affects some commands like view center and cockpit camera move center. I have no idea what this does because it seems to do nothing here. So be careful, because it will reset them to this new position. It will not move the camera to the center of the cockpit. For that you will have to adjust the config manually, and we don't want that. So we will not move the camera, we will just look where we want to, change the FOV, which is the focus of the video, and then we will save this. The default view setting is related to the snap views and to the following option under miscellaneous, use the snap view saving. So check it, it's a very handy feature. And let's get to some cockpit. We will not talk about snap views here, but there is an obvious difference. The default view sticks, so when you choose it, you will get to it and it is there. Snap views are only active while you're holding the key. The parameters of the default view, as well as other snap views, are stored inside your saved games DCS directory. It can be named differently, config view and snapviews.lua config file. There is just this single file for all your planes, unlike input profiles which exist per plane and per device. The default view for each plane is stored under the index 13. You can see it here. This is actually for the plane TF51D, and we can edit it. So let's go for something crazy like 50. Any number will do. We'll save it, and to use it, all you need to do is just leave and fly again. So whether you load the mission or just fly again the same mission, this is the moment when the file is consulted and snap views are initialized. Now again, the FOV is a bit higher, but the moment I use zoom normal, I will get to my favorite 50 degrees FOV. How to set the default view in-game, which is probably more approachable than in the file. First things first, you have to press the view center shortcut. So now nothing happened because I'm looking that way, but I have to tell the game that this is the view I want to save. When you press the view center, you will tell the game you will want to save the default view, because that's the last view you used. Don't use any snap views after this, otherwise it would save the snap view instead. Set your view as you wish. So let's say this is what okay, it's a bit fast, so let's just turn the key rate down again. This is what I want, any zoom will do. And then you will press the save cockpit angle shortcut. By default it's right alt num0. Now you can test it. You can change the zoom and view. This will change the view, and this will reset the zoom with view center and zoom normal shortcuts respectively. If you have some preferred FOV saved in your default view, then you likely want to get to it when you release the rocker, right? But right now the zoom axis leaves me in 70 when it's left alone, but my preferred FOV is 104. So how do we set this? First, be sure to have these stats, because you need to see what FOV, what your favorite FOV actually is. It's actually the shortcut from this UI layer. By default, right control pause. But now let's get back to the zoom axis, zoom view here. Yes, it's this one, and we need to tune it. Right now it's symmetric. That's not what we want. We need to move the midpoint to some other value. So we will switch it to slider and use a curve. Right now we can move the middle point or set a different value for it, and then we will just adjust the other points accordingly. Let's say this is fine. This is what we need to do, like conceptually. That's what we need to do. So let's see what the rocker does now. 92, that's better, that's definitely better. So we're obviously more zoomed out, it's not 70 anymore. But the question is, how do we find the right value for the midpoint when we know the FOV? The axis is measured in percents on both axes actually. You have 100 units here, which is input, and 100 units on the output. And these 100 numbers on the output, they cover the whole range of the zoom, which for most planes is 120 degree range. So 1 unit represents 1.2 degree. Thus, your required FOV is like so, plus the minimum FOV, of course. But this equation is for non-inverted axis. Our axis is inverted, and we have to subtract from 100. Also, FOV is the input here. We know the FOV we want, and we are interested in the value of for this middle point. So this is the final equation for most planes. We will generalize it later, but for 100 FOV, let's say we want 100 FOV in some plane, we would need to put 33.3. Good luck with that. There is no way how to enter the point there. If you add more, it's just 100, but you're not able to get precise value. You have to compromise on either 34, which is a bit tighter, or 33, which is a bit wider. With TF51D we're sitting in right now, we're actually lucky because there is 1-to-1 ratio between degrees and output value, because from 20 to 120 there is exactly 100 degrees. So 104, which is our preferred FOV, is what, 16 units away from the maximum. So we need to put 16 here. Now the rest of the curve, that's pretty annoying to work with it. We'll find better ways very soon. But let's say, does this work? Bum bum. 104, here we are, 104, and if I press zoom normal, we see no difference at all. Finally, the general formula is here. So you got your favorite FOV, minimum FOV for the plane, maximum FOV for the plane, and it should give you the axis value. There is a way how to get more precise numbers to the zoom axis setup, as I demonstrate on this L39. So we have cradle 107, perfectly aligned with zoom normal button. So that's our default view. Now, how is the zoom axis set here? You can see some non-integer numbers here. So obviously we must have entered them some other way. Let's cancel it and go to the directory config input the plane, which is L39C joystick, and there I control it with a cradle on a TWCS throttle. So let's open that one with some normal editor. Search for view zoom, zoom view, sorry. And here is the curvature, and you can enter anything here. And notice that the numbers are from 0 to 1, so 1 represents 100 of the value. But you can use even more decimal places than demonstrated here. To make my life easier, I decided to create some kind of spreadsheet where I can just enter the FOV min max for the plane, default FOV I want, and it will calculate the middle point, the value for the middle point. Then it will just put it here between 0 and 1 and calculate the rest of the points as well. I messed with some kind of smoothness here, and the game also tries to make it a little bit smoother. But if you think about it, the cradle has a dead zone in the middle, so you're not able to appreciate any smoothness around this point anyway. So it can be just the two straight lines. I can choose any version here, either for the curve or for the line. I'll just copy it, and this will provide me with the exact stuff I just need to paste here into the file. Bang, and it's there. Save the file. You have to reload it. How to do that? Now I have to go to the controls, choose the plane you want, for instance L39C, and now you can reload this profile from the actual file you changed. So it's config input L39C joystick, this one. Otherwise it reloads only after the game starts. But with a spreadsheet like this, it's easy to do it in bulk, so I will change 107. This goes to this L39C, because I definitely don't want these numbers there. Boom, done. Then I go to the file for SE25T and so on and so on. I will change everything, restart the game, and it's done. Now you know how to make the zoom axis asymmetrical, either in-game or more precisely in the input config file. But there can be a difference between the center of the zoom axis and the default view FOV, not just when we input the number in the game, but also when we use more precise numbers and edit the input config file. The reason is this: the FOV number shown here is rounded. So if I use zoom buttons to set the FOV I like, and then I see 82.1, for instance, it's not necessarily 82.1 precisely, but I use that rounded number for my calculation. So the best thing to do, whether you set the axis in-game or in the config file, is to resave the default view again. Press view center, so let's say I'm looking somewhere else. I press View Center. I will move the zoom axis and release it again, and now I will save this default view, and now it will be perfect. And with that, I can sleep well knowing that my default FOV matches my relaxed zoom axis perfectly. I hope you liked this video and you've learned something new, and with that, fly safe and see you later.